All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Coffee Talk. Can't
Hello.
remember, did I do this last week or not? It's been a little, on and off again. So thank you for coming on, Maria, and being my guest. How does it get better?
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So we have a topic for today that is pretty interesting, and it came up a lot over the weekend. We did an expo here, and we had 7 different facilitators from the Bay Area running bars and doing facelift sessions on people. It was called the New Living Expo, but it really seemed like it was the Old Living Expo because most of the people there were on the older side, kind of ancient. Anyway,
They're ready for something new.
Yeah. The topic is being told versus knowing. So let's just dive in, and you're welcome to start if you like.
Sure. Well, yeah, we were just chatting about this idea and how often people come to us in either to get their bars run or to ask a question, but that they're always asking, like, let me know what you're aware of. If you have something, if you see something, or if you're aware of something that energetically I'm choosing, or people really look to us to kind of almost choose for them instead of
Very much
asking
for them.
yeah. And I
Tell me
know that
what I should
feeling.
do.
Yeah, just tell me what I should choose, or what that someone else must know more than me.
Mhm.
And especially when you're introduced to someone or you see them living the way you might want to live, or they have these tools and they seem to really know something different. It's very tempting. And I think we're really trained to and educated to trust the person. Like you've taken a lot more classes than me. You must know more than me. You're a business, you have a business, you must know more than me.
And there's a
And
difference, because there are people who can educate you to give
right.
you the tools to be able to create that for yourself. But um, like one of the people went to these psychics, and they just stood there, and the psychics had messages for them, like, you're
Yeah.
this way and you're that way and you're joyful
Right.
and you're this. And it's like, okay, that's kind of fun to see if they can get your essence, but
Right.
what is that? Like, don't you know that you're joyful, or that you're
Well, and if you
upset
don't
about
know,
this?
don't you want to know? And why is it not the most interesting thing in the world to ask yourself what you know about you, especially? Why would you want someone else to give that information to you? And there is so much that can be revealed to us through just other people's points of views, of course,
Mhm.
but that we value that so much more. If that's not leading us back to our own point of view,
Mhm.
and to be clear with that,
Yeah.
like, and I think that's really such a gift, is if you can be clear with you and yourself and what your point of view actually is, what you desire, what you know, especially. There's nothing, I mean, nothing more interesting, nothing more fascinating, nothing more creative, nothing that's going to give you more in your life than, like, whether we want someone else to give that to us or not, we have to turn to ourselves.
Yeah. I remember when I had graduated college and I really wanted to move to California, and my family thought I was crazy. And I had decided that when I was like 13, I wanted to move to California.
I
And so
love
I
it.
just zipped my mouth because they thought I was crazy. And
Yeah.
uh, I had this job with a company in Boston, and they had an opening in the sales office in California. And I'm like, I'm going to get that job. And I actually flew to New York to have an interview with the manager who was in New York for a business meeting. They flew me in. It was great. I knew I had the job. And I was telling my family, and they were like, you shouldn't do that. That's a bad idea.
Yeah.
Why doing that. You're not going to, and it was so heavy. And I was like, oh my
Yeah.
God, I'm so wrong. And it's like, no, sorry,
Yeah.
I'm choosing what I know. And as soon as I was like, I'm doing it, 3 months later, after I moved, they were like, this is the best thing you've ever done. And it's like,
Right.
you guys,
You're so brilliant.
the hell? You told me not to do it. Somebody
Yeah.
bribed me. They're like, I'll buy you a car if you stay. I'm like, what the
Yeah.
heck? So
Yeah.
trusting your own knowing and making your choices in life, the things that are light, at least, will always lead you to greater.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad that story led where it did and didn't lead to and then I gave up and had to come to California later, because obviously here we are both in California, and I definitely made the good thing you didn't move to LA, because then you would have been really made wrong. But when I told my brother I was moving to Los Angeles, and I was ready for the judgment and the wrongness, but I knew how much I wanted it. And the first thing he said, well, like, that's random. What are you doing? And I was like, yep, it's random. I just let him have his point of view. I didn't fight for anything, and I knew what I was going to choose. But how often have we given up in that face of judgment and stopped ourselves? And yet, with your story, it's like something in you. It's like, if you want it, if you really want something and desire it, you're going to keep choosing.
Yeah.
And that one choice changes everyone's, including your family who is making you wrong. It's actually a gift to them.
Yeah. Well, everything I ever chose was wrong in my family's point of view. And so I thought that always choosing to fight, in my own way was a good idea. And then I realized that part of the reason that I stayed married was to make my family wrong, that I was right to marry this person who I knew was not necessarily good for me anymore. And it was like, wow, I had to really look at, okay, what am I choosing? And I really contemplated both, like, staying together, even though I had the awareness it wasn't working for me anymore. And I stayed together for another few years. And it was like, oh my God, it was like walking through concrete. It was like, oh, so heavy. And then as soon as I was like, wait a second, if I made this other choice, what would my life be like? And it was like, oh, like, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. And
So,
you could never force your marriage to be that same energy. We can't, how hard have we tried to do that, or to make the job or our family or where we live match that feeling, that energy we really want our lives to be like. And no matter how hard you try, you couldn't have this with being married or living in Boston, or with it's so you always, and that's really interesting, is that we look for other people to give us some awareness about our own choices that we already know the answer to. But we also can only literally trust ourselves.
I don't know. Like, the way you said that, we're looking at other people for awareness. I don't think so. That may be you and me, but most people are looking at other people for the
answers, not awareness. We're just calling it awareness and hope, but it's not. Yeah. You're right.
And they're like, wow, what should I do here? Tell me what to do, or tell me what's good about me because I don't feel good about myself, or tell me what's wrong with me so I can change it. Instead of like, wow, what is right about me that I'm not getting? What do I know? But, even with something that you don't know anything about, or you haven't learned, maybe like your car, like, I don't know how the freaking thing works. I just know that it works. I can bring it to the mechanic.
Yeah.
Because I have an awareness that something's going on, and the mechanic can do the diagnostic. But if that doesn't feel light to me in my awareness, even if I don't know anything about the engine and stuff, I can choose somebody else to look at it, or, I can choose something else. You don't have to necessarily buy their quote unquote wisdom,
Right.
And that's
exactly.
why building your awareness is so important, because you might give up your choice to somebody else who you think knows more than you, and you could be, in for a ride.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't, and it's really not a fun lesson to learn, especially over and over again, is
Yeah.
giving up your awareness, giving up your awareness. And all along, can you actually give that up? Or does part of you always know? And even in the most, abusive or controlling, gaslighting situations, part of you always knows that there's something not quite right. There's something better. There's something you could be choosing. And I wonder if we don't get stuck in the judgment of like trying to get things right or wrong, if we would actually be able to trust our own awareness more, because it seems like trying to get things right or feeling that we're wrong is what makes us question our own knowing.
Yeah.
And that's what takes you out of it. But if you weren't consumed with getting it right or wrong, and okay, I'll be wrong, or I don't know, there is no right or wrong. If that wasn't your, obsession to get your life right,
Well, then what are you going to do?
yeah, well, what are you going to do?
How are you going to navigate?
Right.
What tools do you use to navigate instead of what's right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it just took that, first of all, truly acknowledging that there is no right.
Mm-hmm.
And as and you can stop judging yourself. It seems impossible. When I started learning about tools, like access bars or the clearing statement, or just like, is there a right or wrong? Is that actually true? Or do we all have to align and agree one way or another? And it's a thinking, it's a thought. Sure, it would be nice if everyone could be good and right. But as soon as I realized that was absolutely impossible, that it's okay for me to be wrong for all the things I thought I was wrong, that you were never wrong in the first place. And I don't need to fill that space with positive judgment. But it is a practice in acknowledgement. And I really think that was one of the biggest things that got me out of looking for what's right and wrong, is like acknowledging what's true, what's great, what do I know?
Yeah.
What's great about me? What gift am I? Because that's not being positive or negative. It's just acknowledging
Right.
the greatness that you be.
Yeah. And for me, the heavy and light tool, before I even knew what heavy and light was with access,
Yeah.
like the thing that really makes you go, yes, like 2
Right.
scoops of ice cream,
Right.
that thing that just really, and it's funny how after you're 8 years old, a lot of that enthusiasm for whatever is squelched, because you're made wrong for those silly choices. You're made wrong for
Right.
yeah. But I always had that internal compass of going to the lightness. I didn't like conflict. I didn't like heavy. I didn't like drama and trauma.
Right.
So I always moved to what was light and spacious and peaceful. And when
Mm-hmm.
you choose based on that, your life becomes that. And if you choose
Mm-hmm.
the heavy and trauma drama and, the excitement in that direction, it becomes full of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, even just like within your own body, just thinking about the weight that we can put on, and it's always, who are you being, or who does that belong to? And it's interesting that you knew to go toward what was lighter for you. And maybe even if it was an avoidance of drama, but I, as a kid, just was so aware of the drama, assumed it was mine,
Mm.
and I absolutely took it on as my burden. I would not know how to escape it.
Mm.
Just the awareness of heaviness in my parents' world, or
Mm.
my dad's anxiety or financial struggle. Like, all of that was at that, if I was aware of it, it was mine.
Mm.
That's another really interesting thing. Like maybe that's a reason we avoid wanting to claim and acknowledge what we're actually aware of,
Well, you know,
because we just assume that all this heavy shit we're feeling, oh, sorry,
yeah,
is ours.
yeah. I think that's the gift of like being in nature or just being by yourself for a while. And I used to play in like in the backyard. We had woods, and I used to
Mm,
play there, and so all
yeah,
that stuff would disappear. And so it was like, wow, that's very different. And also when I was painting or drawing, so when I was doing art, I was like in a whole different universe.
yeah,
And so then when I'm back with the family and there's all of that, that I was like this sensitive kid.
right.
I just didn't say much. I just listened and paid attention and was like, oh my God.
Right.
But I
But
knew
still judged
there was
as
a difference.
sensitive and
Yeah. So you can sense, and it's funny, my kids will tell me that, like, my daughter, she's like getting ready to go for this long trip with her brother to Europe. They're leaving tomorrow.
oh, cool.
And yesterday she was kind of freaking out. And I was like, what are you doing? And she goes, I so don't feel like myself. And I'm like, so
Yeah,
you just have this awareness that something needs to change. What do you need to change? You need to change this, that, whatever, what you're bringing, things weren't fitting into the suitcase.
yeah,
And like usually within a half an hour or an hour, something changes. And then she's like, this is me again.
yeah,
And she knows enough to know not to stay in that weird energy too long, and that it's not her. Because
yeah.
she's been in this space of, she knows who she is
Yeah.
most of her life. Which,
Miracle.
like,
Yeah.
wow. Wouldn't that be nice
Yeah.
if we all had that,
Right. But can you also acknowledge like the space that you created, the
we
invitation,
created that
you
for, yeah.
were part of that. And like if you hadn't allowed her that and asked her those questions and been that space where she can come to you and freak out a little bit, it's like she's allowed to do that with you. Like not all of us have a parent where we can go to and be in that space and let it transform. And like
Yeah.
that she is on her about to go to Europe, it's like, oh wow.
Yeah.
Like, yes, I wish we had that. And what do we have that we are inviting our children to, that's completely different, but totally their own universe
Yeah.
and choices.
And like, I don't
And
have the answers for her,
yeah.
So it's a
And
lot of
you could have been
times
freaking
I
out.
feel like I don't know what to say to you. I get that you're really struggling with this, but what are you going to do? What are you going to choose?
Yeah.
Without sounding access like, because there's some pushback to that.
Right. But in total being present and still an allowance without you, because I can imagine with myself, just like, I'll fix this for you,
Mhm.
or I'll take, it's going to be okay. It's like, let's unpack and repack, or, wanting to handle something for someone, especially our children.
Mhm.
And that is a place where I could use more awareness of, as I don't like when other people ask me for my awareness, but it is still very difficult for me to be out of control allowance of my children and not want to teach them the lessons or give them in this, if there's valuable information, I obviously share it, but there's a space of wanting to save them from any pain or discomfort, or to be all set up, like if you have your backpack perfectly packed, then your trip is going to be great. And like, we can't
No,
kid ourselves. Like
that's where the magic happens. Like when we were setting up for the expo,
mhm,
we get to the booth and we're like, oh, wow, like this is way tighter than we thought. And the curtains, they had like maroon and silver. I mean, hideous colors. We're like, wow, we're going to need to do something to cover that. And so
right.
we're like, okay, what are we going to do? We brought stuff from home. but we still needed to get something. So we all went to this home goods store that was right around the corner and really cheap, but fun stuff. And, we just, it's like the things showed up, and that's
Yeah.
part of the fun of creation, is not planning everything out and not trying to get
Yeah.
perfect before you do it.
Right.
You can use your energy to co-create with the universe and have fun with it.
I love that.
So
And we don't need to make everything comfortable. I think that's another thing, is we try to look for an awareness that makes us comfortable. So it's like, mom, just tell me everything's okay. Like, everybody give me this feedback that everything's okay. And if you are willing to let that go, what you can actually, and when you said the word create, I was like, oh yeah, like, what are your kids going to create on their trip? And like, so cool. And that space of, and even, of course, it'd be nice to go to the expo and everything's perfectly set up for you. But also, how cool is it that we get to create? We get to take this ugly maroon and silver sparkles and change this. Like, it matters to you. You get to care about that. It matters, and the aesthetic and
oh my gosh,
everything that's important to you. And so, like, I really think too, another thing about our own awareness is being an allowance of whatever it is, and stop making ourselves anything right, wrong, justified. Like, we don't have to come to these conclusions, but if we actually just, it's like, okay, this is something I'm aware of. Now what? And we don't need to assume that we're going to suffer for every awareness we have.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, wow, there's so many ways to build your awareness. It's just a muscle that we have, and we haven't necessarily been using it. So what are your favorite ways to build your awareness?
Yeah, I would say that the number one is start asking questions and really listening and acknowledging. And then I really, and like, when I say acknowledge, I mean like just saying hello to my body, to myself, and acknowledging those are two different things. So like, as soon as I acknowledge that, my awareness of my body and my being are louder. And then I acknowledge the earth, and that I wouldn't have this body without the earth. And then I go right into acknowledging the entities of the earth, my teammates that I'm aware of. And I practice acknowledging them, but the more and more
Teammates. People may not know about teammates.
Yeah. So when looking at the earth, that's where it started, was, okay, there's the earth beneath our feet. And it's such like, there's so much energy, but like realizing that the earth itself is its own it's separate entity. And then that each, within the trees, and I think ever since I was young, just being aware of spirits, and that I could see little things floating, and
Twinkly.
fairies and sparkles. And when I started to acknowledge that more, my life, and it continues, just even saying that, I have so much more awareness of what's true, who's with us, that spirits aren't in heaven somewhere on a cloud, like they're right here. And then really going into the, like, just the acknowledgement of the spirits outside and the trees, and that they're all around. And that there was something I was avoiding that I could be receiving. And so I really go into just like saying hello, and like maybe you can say more about how you see teammates, but I've just always been aware that there's spirits or entities that stay with us, that are on our team, that you can ask for contribution. I'm certain some people would call them angels or whatever, but that I was never alone.
Yeah.
And yeah,
It's interesting that, like, when you say that, the distinction between teammates and angels, like angels is when you put them above you, or
right,
guides, you're making them
right,
greater. It's that same thing of being told rather than no.
right,
Whereas
right.
teammates, it's just beings that have your back, knowing that you're not
Yeah,
alone, and that
yeah,
what you choose, you're leading, you're choosing, it's your life, but they're there to contribute.
yeah,
It's a subtle difference, and probably a lot of people who call it angels or guides are just like, they're misidentifying, and they're putting their power or potency onto these other beings, but it's actually theirs. So if they
right.
tweak that one little thing, they'd have
Yeah.
so much more awareness and so much more of them.
Yeah, and we could receive so much more. It's like it's really hard to receive if someone is making you so significant that they can't even look at you, And it's funny to think of making entities so significant we can't even look at them, but like we actually are doing that, because how many entities are trying to get our attention, are right in front of us, and just waiting. If you say, and that's what I mean, is just say hello. Whoever's here, hello, hi, who are you? And you can, the tools of talk to the entities, and I know you're coming to do that class. They're just so incredibly effective. And it's hard. I do see where it's hard not to make this significant. And it's also a reason I see a lot of people run away from their awareness, is like whatever the lies of Hollywood or ghosts are like scary and bad, and or they don't exist, or everyone has to have this opinion on, or let's say either like shut it off, I don't want to talk about it,
Yeah.
which just seems to be the most
It's
common
like,
way.
no, I don't want to know.
Yeah, right. But what a mistake, because it's been, I mean, not only with my own father who passed, over 15 years ago. I mean, the relationship we have now, the possibility now, with only because I'm aware of how to acknowledge him,
Mm.
that changed everything in my life. Not only for me, for my siblings, and when other people have passed since, I've had an extreme effect on how that transition continues to unravel, because what you learn in the talk to the entities classes is how miseducated. There's no, that awareness is just shut off so early on
Yeah.
and shut down, and just, you're crazy if you're talking, it's basically for crazy people.
Yeah.
And if you're willing to be considered crazy, there's so much we can receive from entities, and they, just by acknowledging that they're here.
Mm-hmm.
And I've love that video you posted about, you were on your way to a session and you had the awareness of the guy's father come in,
It was a date.
and it was,
Coffee date.
it was a coffee. Oh, it was you were going on a date.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
how funny. Because I saw a date and I didn't get it. Okay. So it
It
was
was a
your
coffee
date.
date.
Yeah.
And we had talked on the
I
phone to set
love
it
it.
up. And he had told me that he had been depressed for 10 years and his father had died. And so I knew his father had died. And then driving to meet him, the father came really
Oh,
strongly, like pounding on my head.
yeah.
I'm like, all right, I'll talk to him, but you have to pay me. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
cool. And super simple. And so, giving messages from beings on the other side is also not telling people what they should do.
Right.
It's sharing some
Oh, no.
information and giving them a question. And wow, the expansion of his world and the
Yeah. I can
universe
feel it.
and
Mhm.
I was just like, oh my God, I could do this all day. It
I
was
love that.
it
Mhm.
was so beautiful. It
I
was
love
so
that.
beautiful. Yeah.
I know. I know that moment of realization that he's,
Yeah.
your dad is not gone. He's right here. And he's going to tell you, but here's a bunch of
And like,
wonderful,
they had a
yeah.
misunderstanding and he never got to say something. And so like all of that guilt and stuff that had built up
Right.
just melted. It was amazing.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that. And that is right there is the gift of following your own awareness. Because if you, the more and more you do that, the more and more you have moments like this where you're like, I could do this all day. You're aware of the gift you're being, you're changing his life. He has the awareness of his father,
Yeah.
what that does for the entities also. I mean,
Yeah.
it goes on and on and on and on. But if you were taught to be scared of that or ignore it or like you're crazy, you're going on a date, forget about that. Like focus on looking good,
Like, how do you bring that up when you're on a date? I mean,
right.
I'm sitting there going, well, okay. I don't really
But
want
that
to talk about
shows,
weather and whatever. Like, dude.
yeah, it's never what you think it's going to be. And
Yeah.
that's why awareness is so incredible and interesting. It's like you think you're going on a date. And that's for you, and you want to have a date and you're gonna get dressed up and it's all about you. And yet, like what actually happens and
Yeah.
whether marry this guy or never see him again, it's
You know what's
we never
interesting?
know.
Yes, absolutely. And for me, it was just, that was the purpose, to meet.
Right.
It was not for me, but of course, like after that, he thought he was in love. I'm like,
I'm sure
so-
you're the
but
answer.
I
Yeah.
heard from him 6 months later. He said his entire life changed. He
Mhm.
moved, he was working out, he met this other woman, they're happily together, just everything opened up for him. So that was
Right.
another thing. And
I
there was
love
something
it.
else. Oh, when I was driving and knew that it was his father, it started off with a headache, an intense headache. So many
Yeah.
times aches and pains in your body is awareness of entities.
Yeah.
We're going over our coffee talk. Anyway, if you want to
I
hear
love
more
that.
about this, come on to the Facebook Live in half an hour.
Yes.
I'm going to do it in my Finding Your Sparkle group, where I do
Okay.
most of my stuff, and we can share it into, the LA group and stuff.
Okay.
So thanks for playing.
Thank you. That was fast.
Yeah, it really was. And I will see you in 30 minutes.
Okay.
Bye,
Thanks, Julie.
everybody.
Bye.